Before Moses, there were midwives. Two women responding to one deadly command defied Pharaoh, chose life, and changed history. Why do we barely know their names? Today on the Chick Report, we're talking with my guest, Old Testament scholar, Dr. Carmen Imes. Welcome, my friend. Dr. Carmen Imes is joining us today. So happy to have you. Tell my listeners, my viewers, kind of what you do vocationally before we dive in. We want to know about your YouTube channel, your Biola. Fill us in.
Okay. I'm an associate professor of Old Testament at Biola University. I was talking with a student yesterday who thought that associate professor meant that I didn't quite work for Biola, but that I was just associated with it. So for all those who are unaware, associate professor is a rank. It's above assistant professor and before full professor. So one day maybe I will be a whole professor, but right now.
So you are a professor,
I am.
But the job title is associate professor.
Correct.
Absolutely. I had the same thing in my place of employ, and people were a little incensed that most of the men were professors, but I was only an associate. And I had to say, I came late to the scene.
Yes,
I'm still working. Yeah,
exactly. I got my PhD at 39. So I'm, I'm a little slower at this. Yeah. So I, when I'm not teaching undergrads all about the Bible and how great the Old Testament is, I'm writing books. So my current project is a commentary on Exodus that I've been working on for almost 6 years. So that makes our topic a good one for me today.
Yeah. Before we dive into our topic, though, you have to put in a plug, both for your current book on the church and your Tuesday Torah. I want my people to know all the things you're doing.
So I had a book come out about 6 weeks ago on the church. So Becoming God's Family, Why the Church Still Matters is a book. It's my love letter to the church and for the church. I'm writing to three types of people. I'm writing to people who've already left the church, either because they just lost interest or it wasn't scratching where they itch anymore, or because they're actually distressed by something that they've seen in the church, maybe disillusioned, and maybe wondering what are they missing, or is this okay if they're still kind of wrestling. I'm writing for somebody with one foot out the door saying, give me one good reason to stay. People who are, again, wrestling with hypocrisy or abuse cover-up or just kind of seeming lack of relevance. And then I'm writing for people who are all in, church, maybe church staff or big volunteers who love the church and want to see her flourish. And so I'm trying to paint a picture of what we could become if we did things the way God designed us to, which is to do life together.
You're an Old Testament scholar. So the church and the Old Testament, I know there's an intersection.
There is. I'm actually tracing the theme through scripture of the presence of God showing up in the gathered community. So a lot of people think of the day of Pentecost as the day the church started, but I'm arguing that actually once the people arrive at Sinai and they're brought into covenant with Yahweh, that is really the moment when the church starts. It's the community of faith entering into a covenant relationship with God and his presence deciding to be among them. So so there's continuity, and I'm trying to show that. I have a YouTube channel, as you said. I'm taking a short break from it at the moment because life is a lot, but I'm usually releasing weekly videos called Torah Tuesday or book recommendation videos, and it's pretty nerdy. But if you're the nerdy type, come join me on YouTube.
Come on. I think our little tagline for this podcast is scholarship with a touch of slang. The Chick Report kind of has that in it. You got Chick, slang, report, academics.
Yep.
My people will love you if they don't already know you. All right, let's dig into the text then. So just as a refresher, we're going to be talking about the midwives. Actually, you tell us, what's their story?
Yeah, so the opening chapter of Exodus is a really bleak time in Israel's history. The Hebrew people are enslaved in Egypt. Their labor belongs to Pharaoh, and they're being forced to work probably to build how do I want to say this? The sort of accessories to a funerary cult. So Pharaoh would have been building a temple where he would be worshipped in perpetuity, and around that would have been lots of storage units to stock up all the supplies that he would need to be worshipped after he died. And it seems that the Hebrews are building those storage units out of mud bricks. So they've been conscripted into a project that is very much at odds with what Yahweh says is true. And
so they're not only enslaved, they're enslaved doing something they find repulsive.
Probably, yeah. Wow. So the particular word that's used to describe these storage units, storage cities is how it's sometimes translated, is miskanot, which is just the plural form of miskan. And it's interesting that that's what they're building at the beginning of the book. And at the end of Exodus, they're building a mishkan for Yahweh, a dwelling place for Yahweh. So there's a really cool symmetry between the two building projects. But right away we meet these midwives, and they are conscripted by Pharaoh in hopes that they will put to death young Hebrew boys. And he seems to be paranoid about the Hebrew people rebelling against his rule, that maybe if invaders came, they would join the invaders because they've been mistreated. Note to Pharaoh, if you don't want the people who work for you to rebel against you, perhaps you should treat them fairly. That would be another way to ensure that they don't rebel against you. But instead, he wants to keep exploiting their labor. And so he says, oh, let's put to death the baby boys and let every girl live. His premise seems to be that the boys will grow up to be soldiers, but the girls will not be a threat.
Oh, the irony.
Yes, and it is so ironic because in the first 2 chapters of Exodus, it's the women at every turn who undermine Pharaoh and who defy him and work against him. And so he seems to have miscalculated the enemy.
I love your choice of verb there, Carmen. Miscalculated. It's like massive understatement. Like it reminds me of the scene in Legally Blonde where she's describing her ex's girlfriend, and she's like, she's not completely unfortunate looking. You can't bring herself to say she's beautiful. Okay.
Oh no.
So he's underestimating these women. All right. So he's commanding infanticide, and yet these women. And they're named. So let's talk about them being named.
They are, yeah. So Shiphrah and Puah are their names. And this stands in stark contrast to Pharaoh, who's not named. And it's really fascinating that the book of Exodus never names Pharaoh. There's different theories out there about why that is. I think the two that seem most persuasive to me are that the narrator is actually, there's a deliberate calculation here because there are 2 pharaohs in Exodus. There's the one when Moses is a baby, and then there's the one when Moses goes back to demand the release of the Hebrews. And those are different pharaohs, but by not naming them, they sort of merge and become like one massive enemy. But also it was Egyptian practice not to name defeated enemies. And so probably this is Yahweh's diss at, I have conquered Pharaoh. He does not deserve to be named. But let me tell you about these 2 women who undermined him.
Oh, we have a spunky little narrator here, don't we?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
fun.
The text says that they fear God. So unpack what that means. So to fear God in Exodus.
It's interesting because it's not Yahweh, it's Elohim. So it's the generic word for God.
Okay.
So we don't know exactly what shape their faith takes.
Okay.
But I think what's important for us to know is that they have a greater fear of divine punishment than they do of Pharaoh's punishment. So Pharaoh has asked them to engage in behavior that would be at odds with their commitment, right? They became midwives because they love babies and mothers and want to help them survive. That's why people go into that line of work. And Pharaoh is asking them to do something that's completely counter to their impulse as midwives. And yet, and if they were afraid of what he could do to them, they might be persuaded to follow through. But their fear of God is greater than their fear of Pharaoh. They realize that at the end of the day, they answer to the divine voice, the divine judge, and they know that it's not right to kill baby boys, and so they refuse to do it.
And the text could go either way as to whether they're Hebrew or not. Talk about
It could go
identity.
either way. So their names, Shiphrah and Puah, are they could be Hebrew names, meaning, let me make sure I get it right, meaning beauty and young woman. Like they have like kind of Hebrew sounding. I've also heard that they could be Egyptian. So I think there's some ambiguity there. But you would actually need a grammatical difference in the text to say that they were midwives for the Hebrews rather than Hebrew midwives.
Okay.
So in English, you could say Hebrew midwives, and it could be like they either are Hebrew or they're midwifing for Hebrews.
Yeah.
But in Hebrew, we would need we'd need a grammatical change to say
So the
that.
Hebrew's leaning toward them actually being Hebrews.
I am leaning, I think the Hebrew leans that way. I lean that way. It is a bit ambiguous, and I'm not certain. I was just talking with my male colleague who's also writing a commentary on Exodus, and I told him what we were going to be talking about. He's like, all right, so what do you think? Are they Hebrew or Egyptian? And I lean toward Hebrew. He leans toward Egyptian, but neither of us are sure. I think as a woman, if you think about like an immigrant woman, a community of immigrant women who are giving birth far from their homeland in a place that's hostile towards them and exploitative, who do you want to invite into the birthing room in your moment of greatest vulnerability? I wouldn't think there would be a natural inclination to look to the Egyptians for help in giving birth.
Gotcha.
That's
sense.
just sort of my own anecdotal gut feeling as a woman. I don't know. Yeah.
So these women don't overthrow Pharaoh, but they certainly undermine him quietly.
They do.
What do you think? What do you think that suggests in terms of application? We'll come back to other things in the text.
Yeah, I do think that like all of the women in the early chapters of Exodus defy Pharaoh by working within their natural sphere of influence. There's not actually, it's not like it's this great women's lib movement where everybody's throwing on, like, I'm not going to be a mom anymore. I'm not going to be a wife anymore. I'm not going to whatever. They're still doing the thing, the mothers, the sisters, the midwife.
Yeah.
But they do so in such a way that they undermine Pharaoh's purposes. So I do think there's an empowering message here that within whatever sphere of influence you have, you can work for God's purposes and you can work against purposes that are anti-life or at odds with God's way in some way.
Yeah. Don't you imagine they probably felt powerless?
I wonder, if they did, especially being summoned by Pharaoh himself and told to behave in a certain way. Like, I wonder how that would feel.
And to then disobey.
But they seem to do so. Like, we're not told that they're afraid. I mean, we're told they're afraid of God, not of Pharaoh.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we don't see them trembling when he summons them back to the palace to say, why haven't you killed the babies? Like, why have you let the boys live? They answer so shrewdly and almost like coyly. They say, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They're vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive. Now, it's unclear whether this is true or not.
Or if they're playing the stereotype, which is more believable to Pharaoh. Right?
Yes, right? So ironically, Pharaoh has been treating the Hebrews as animals. He has been exploiting their physical labor and not treating them humanely. They don't get a day off. They don't get to worship their God. And in Hebrew, the word vigorous sounds like animal. So it's like hayah.
Oh my goodness.
So they're hayot. So he's been treating them like animals and now they're animal-like. And so there's this beautiful, like, they play into the stereotype of disgust that Pharaoh has towards them. And we see the disgust or dread in verse 12. The Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. There's a kind of racism or ethnocentrism that's aimed against them. And so we don't know. Is it true that they're giving birth without midwives, or are the midwives being evasive and playing into this stereotype? And we don't know either way. I think a lot of Christians might assume like, well, God wouldn't condone lying, but there's actually a lot of examples in the Bible of deception
to save a life. Heck yeah.
To save
right?
a life. Like, and this goes back to the classic example. If you're hiding Jews and the Nazis knock on the door and ask, if you are hiding Jews, do you have to tell the truth or can you lie? And this is one of the things that Corrie ten Boom and her sister wrestle with as Dutch women who are hiding Jews in their home. And Corrie has the conviction that it's fine to lie to Nazis whose purposes are so at odds with God's. And her sister Betsy feels that honesty is the most important policy, but she uses honesty in subversive ways. She says, yeah, they're right under the table. Like,
which they literally are.
They literally are under the trap door, but she says it in such a way that makes them think she's joking. And so she gets away with telling the truth in a way that's deceptive. There's still actually deception in the way that she says that.
It's not full on verbal. Okay.
Yeah. So this is something students ask me about, like, wait a minute, is lying okay? Like God, because it says that God was kind to the midwives and the people increased and became more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. So there's a kind of divine blessing on these women. And does God bless people who lie? And so I think it's really important for us to notice they feared God. So they're lying. If that's in fact what they're doing, their deception is in line with God's purposes, and they understand that they will answer to God at the end of the day. So this is not the same as a student who is signing into class for their roommate to pretend they went to class when they didn't. Like it's not getting out of negative consequences that are appropriate consequences. It's working against someone who is anti-life.
Evil. Evil.
Yeah.
That's a great distinction. So why do you think we get their names?
Yeah, so I think that this is kind of doing the opposite of what it does with Pharaoh by not naming Pharaoh. It's demoting him. Okay. And here we're exalting and remembering the names of these women. One of the worst fears of an ancient Israelite was to not be remembered after death. They didn't seem to be particularly worried about dying. Like they don't seem anxious about death. What they're anxious about is not being remembered after they die, which is why infertility becomes like such a preoccupation, because it's children that will remember you after you die and carry on the family name. I'm not worried about me living forever. I know I can't, but my children will carry on the name. So this is why you have like Absalom, who has no children, setting up a monument to himself because he's anxious about not being remembered. So I think by naming these women, we have the narrator's stamp of approval on them and a way of carrying on their legacy.
Then why in the next chapter are Miriam and Moses' mom, and Moses himself and the princess, none of them are named?
Yes. So I think what's happening in the next chapter is a kind of hush whisper, because in the book names them in other places, but in this particular scene, what they're doing is dangerous, and they have to tiptoe, and so we're not going to say their names because if this is overheard, right? So as an example, my Dutch grandmother worked in the Dutch underground during World War II. So she worked to deliver messages to Allied soldiers. She would take her bicycle and roll up the messages and put them in the handlebars of her bike so that she could get past Nazi checkpoints. Wow. So if I ever feel fierce and defiant, I get it from my grandmother. I come by it honestly. So I had the opportunity to go with her to an event that was now 20 years ago, but it was the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II, where all the members of the Dutch underground who were still alive gathered together with the mayor to see each other. So I happened to be on a trip with her to see the Netherlands for the first time, and she was showing me where she grew up. what was really interesting is not only do people change a lot in 60 years, so people had a difficult time recognizing each other, but they had not gone by their real names during the war, right? They didn't use their names because they wanted to never accidentally reveal the identity of anyone else who was working against the Nazis. So they were going around saying like, oh, do you know? And they'd say their name, but it didn't really help because it was like, hush. They had fake names or whatever.
Interesting.
So I think in Exodus chapter 2, there's two things going on. I think there's a hush, and there's also a cool symmetry between the female characters that we miss if we name them. So the chapter opens with a man of the tribe of Levi married a daughter of Levi, and then we have a daughter of Pharaoh. So the daughter of Levi is the mother of the child, and then the daughter of Pharaoh is the adoptive mother. And the two of them become co-conspirators in the salvation of Moses. And so by not naming them, we can see the symmetry. Like, here are two women from very different backgrounds. One's rich, one's poor, one's powerful, one is oppressed. But they both decide that the right thing to do is save this child instead of follow orders. And they both engage in considerable risk to do so. And so that's I think one benefit of not naming them, as we can see that symmetry.
But it's clearly a narrator's choice.
Yeah.
And it's not rooted in misogyny. So let's talk about that.
No, because we've got their names. Miriam is named later. We see her in chapter 15. We see Yocheved or Jochebed named in chapter 6 in the genealogy. So the narrator had access to their names. This is not about like expunging women from the record. I think it's more about giving us this literary setting in which we realize there's a lot at stake here.
It's story.
It's story. It's really well told story. And there's so much about it. Like I love the part when the child is born and it says when she saw that he was a fine child, which feels kind of bland in English. In Hebrew, it's she saw that he was good. It's the same language as we have in Genesis 1.
Really?
So the mother of Moses is looking at him and agreeing with God's assessment of humanity as good creation, rather than this is a threat to be eliminated and I should throw him in the river. I love it that she actually does put him in the river. Like the rule is throw every boy into the Nile. So she does.
Yeah.
Very gently in a basket.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's pause there for a second because there's so much humor. Like, let's talk about the narrator and like, what are some of the word plays and games you're seeing here in the story?
There's so much.
Missing in English.
Yeah, there's so much going on here. So one of the really fun things is that Miriam, who is not named, it's the sister of the baby, she takes her stand by the river to keep watch. And if you fast forward to chapter 5, 6, 7, Moses will take his stand by the Nile to confront Pharaoh as he's coming down to the water. It's the same verb, and we've got the same family confronting the same family. And so there's a symmetry between the rescue of Moses and the rescue of Israel. And Miriam is playing the role of deliverer in the first one, which is so cool. When Pharaoh's daughter comes down to the riverbank, Miriam goes to her and says, "May I go?" Which is just really fun. When you see the symmetry, once you see it, you can't unsee it. She uses the word go multiple times. So instead of "let my people go," which is what Moses will eventually say, she says, "May I go and get a mother to nurse this baby for you?" And she says, "Yes, you may go," which is the response we want from Pharaoh later.
You may go.
We're getting it from his daughter, but we don't get it from him.
Interesting.
So the
daughter is the one saying go. Okay.
Yes. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter says to her, and it's so hard to see in English because in the NIV it says, "Take this baby and nurse him for me." But it's in Hebrew, a hifil imperative of go. So it's make him go. So she's like not just letting him go, she's making him go. Back to his birth mother to be nursed. So I think that's really cool. She pays Moses' mother to nurse him, which is just fabulous. And I think also a point of connection with the rescue of Israel's story. When Moses goes back and the people finally get to leave Egypt, they go with wealth given to them by their neighbors. So there's even an echo or anticipation.
Foreshadowing.
Yes. And then she names him
okay.
after he's weaned and brought back to the daughter of Pharaoh. We finally get a name. So it's the daughter of Pharaoh who's naming the child. And it says he became her son. She named him Moshe or Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. So there's a wordplay in Hebrew because Masha is to draw. So Moshe is one who draws out, which is so interesting because who is the one who draws out in this story? Actually, it's the daughter of Pharaoh. Wow. She is the one who, instead of throwing him into the river, is drawing him out. So she's actually memorializing her own audacity by naming him Moses. Like every time she calls him for dinner, she's going to remind Moses, she's going to hear that echo of having drawn him out.
Of the audacity of a woman. Okay.
Yes.
That's fun.
But I think this is actually a bilingual wordplay because it has a cool echo in Hebrew, but it also has a really cool echo in Egyptian. The particle Moshe or Mose in Egyptian means son of, and it's part of lots of royal names in New Kingdom Egypt. So Tutmos, Ahmos, even Ramses has the same particle in it. And so Ramesses is son of Ra, who's the sun god. Normally you would have the name of the deity that you are considered the embodiment of as Pharaoh. So Tutmos is the son of Tut, the god of writing. So for her to call him Moses without an attached divine element is a way of saying he's the son of, we don't know who is he's the son of. It's like adding a question mark about his sonship. So who's he the son of? The son of Levi, the son of Levi, or is he the son of Pharaoh? Or is he the son of Yahweh or the son of Ra? So there's an ambiguity introduced to Moses' ethnic identity and his belonging in his relationship with God that then plays out over the rest of the chapter and into his encounter with Yahweh at the burning bush, where he doesn't seem to know who he's the son of, and he's not sure where he belongs because he has this hybrid identity, born Hebrew, nursed by a Hebrew mother, which they would have understood to be the transmission of culture through breastfeeding, but raised in an Egyptian household, taught Egyptian language, he presumably went to school, knew how to read and write Egyptian. So
Later he meets some girls at a well and they say an Egyptian helped us. So he must be dressing like one, haircut like one.
Yes, and he doesn't introduce himself. And normally when a patriarch shows up at a well and there's a marriage by the end of the scene, normally he introduces himself and says who he is, but Moses does not, which suggests that Moses is not really sure who he is or how he should identify. And then he meets Yahweh at the mountain, and the first thing God tells him is, I am the God of your father, which is crazy because father is normally plural. He normally would say, I'm the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but it's singular here, which is unusual. I'm the God of your father. And if I'm Moses, I'm wondering, could we sort that out here a minute? Who is my father? Like, which father do you mean? Because he's got a Hebrew father, presumably an Egyptian father. We don't know if his adoptive mother was married. Or is he talking about his Midianite father? Where does he belong? His name is a question mark. The son of... And Yahweh meets him, and in one encounter, he resolves the question of who God is and who Moses is. I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is so beautiful because he's situating Moses in the covenant community as a legitimate member of the people that the people whose cries God has heard and is ready to rescue.
Wow. I'd love it. Sit for that for a minute.
Yeah.
So why do you think the narrator has all these women appearing before we ever get to a burning bush?
Well, it's really fun to track the verbs. So I first noticed this. I have an illustrated Exodus book in Hebrew. So this is a fun resource. It's the entire Hebrew text of Exodus,
A graphic novel?
like
Okay.
graphic novel style, with my English translation at the bottom. So when I agreed to write this for Glossa House,
Illustrated Exodus.
I started doing the translation, and of course at the beginning in chapter 1, and I kept finding verb forms that were very unfamiliar to me because they were feminine plural. Like the subject of the verb was feminine plural.
Interesting.
And when you take Hebrew class and you learn Hebrew verbs, typically your default is masculine singular and masculine plural, because in Hebrew, grammatically, if you have one man in the room, there's a whole group of people. If there's just one man, then you use the masculine pronouns. And this is not like dissing women. It's just like how the grammar works. But suddenly we had a story where there's lots of women doing things. So feminine singular and feminine plural verbs were everywhere. And it was so striking to me. And that's what made me start to think, wow, there's something really unique happening in this story. Women are being really active. What's going on? And when you start to pay attention to the verbs, so for example, Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe. Her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket, sent her female slave to get it, opened it and saw the baby. He was crying and she felt sorry for him. Then if you just fast forward to the end of chapter 2, it says that that the Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God, and God heard their groaning, remembered his covenant. He looked on them and was concerned about them. And then he tells them again, chapter 3, verse 7, I've seen the misery of my people. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So what I'm trying to say is the description of God as a rescuer matches the description of the daughter of Pharaoh when she rescues him. So we have a double story in Exodus, the rescue of Moses followed by the rescue of Israel. And before Yahweh ever rescues Israel, the women rescue Moses. And it's all these women conspiring together against Pharaoh to do the right thing. And what it says of them, it will later say of God. So if you want to know what God is like in the book of Exodus, look at the women. Isn't that so fun?
Okay. I'm not usually speechless, but okay. So let's talk to listeners, viewers who are feeling powerless. What's your word from Exodus?
Resist. Resist being told what to do when it's at odds with what you know is right. And I think there are a lot of women who don't feel like they have power, but every one of us has a sphere of influence. It might be small, but we have a sphere. And so you might think, well, I'm not an influencer. Influencers are people with lots and lots of followers on social media. They get asked to do lots of very public things. But the women in this story have a wide range of how influential they actually are. The daughter of Pharaoh probably has a lot more influence than her slave. And then Miriam and Moses' mother, right? These are oppressed women, and yet they have a sphere of influence. They have one child whose life has been entrusted to them, and they devise a way to save it. You might not be able to save every baby, but you can save this one.
Wow.
And I think in our world today, there are so many problems. There are so many things that are not right, and so many vulnerable people who need help. I just heard an interview with Tim Tebow, a former Bronco quarterback and Christian, and he was an MVP in football. And now he says he thinks of MVP instead of most valuable player. He likes to think about most vulnerable people. Who are the most vulnerable people, and how can I position myself to advocate for them, to provide for them? And so you can't save everyone. You can't fix all the things, but you can do something. And so my encouragement is to find the issue that God has put on your heart that is like, this is not right. I want to do something about this. and then use whatever influence you have, even if it's really small, to work in the right direction. And if all of us do that, then we end up rescuing those who will rescue many others, right?
Yeah.
So if Moses hadn't been rescued by these few women, would the Israelites ever be set free as a nation? And they couldn't see when they were rescuing that one child that it was going to end up in the rescue of a whole nation. All we see is right now, this is the right thing to do. If we're faithful with that, God will do the other things with it.
And don't you think the narrator wants us to see that? Like, there's a reason we didn't start with a burning bush.
There is a reason.
There's even a reason we didn't start from him walking out of the palace.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where people are resisting before he's born.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably even the resistors had no clue they were saving Israel.
Yeah.
Right?
Probably not.
I just a mom of a vulnerable baby trying to do the right thing. Yeah.
Right. And I love that. I love that Moses, who later becomes so strong, begins as a vulnerable child in need of rescue himself. And there's another layer to these rescuing women that comes up in chapter 4, which is a complicated scene in which Moses' wife Zipporah rescues him.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. I didn't have it in the notes, but an enigmatic story, and yet she's rescuing him. Which seems to fit this whole theme of all the women are rescuing.
Not only does it fit the theme, but it provides a nice frame around the rescue of Moses. So he's rescued by women at the beginning, and then he's rescued by Zipporah just on the verge of going back to become a rescuer himself, because he's out of compliance with God's demands. God has told his covenant people the one thing he's told them is to circumcise your sons as a sign of the covenant. And Moses is apparently out of compliance. He has not done this. How can he go lead a nation into something he hasn't obeyed himself?
Wow.
And so his life is at risk. She snaps into action. We have no idea how she knows what to do, but she's a ritual practitioner who is skilled and able to read the moment and see what's necessary. And what's extra fun is that her name in Hebrew sounds almost like Shiphrah. So in English, it's not the same. Like we have Shiphrah and Zipporah, but in Hebrew, it's Zipporah and Shiphrah. So it's just a very slight difference. And in Greek, it's identical. So you have like this really cool symmetry that's also signaling something's happening. And then if we fast forward to the rescue of Israel, when they come out of Egypt and pass through the Sea of Reeds, this is another cool symmetry. Moses is put among the reeds in the basket. The people pass through the Sea of Reeds as they're rescued. We call it the Red Sea, but there's a long translation history why we call it that. The Hebrew says reeds. So they're at the Reed Sea. So there's symmetry there. But then who's there on the shores of this body of water bearing witness to what God has done? It's Miriam. And she's leading the people, exhorting them, actually, sing to Yahweh. She's directing worship on the shores of the sea. And it's so important that she be there to bear witness, because she bore witness to the first deliverance as well. And they're in both stories, she's stationed herself at the lip of the body of water.
Wow.
I think we're supposed to notice this. It's such a well-crafted narrative. We're supposed to notice like, oh, we've seen something like this before. So if we've missed all the other signals, we should be like, oh, wait, this is kind of like last time.
So what do we lose when we ignore the women in Exodus?
Oh, we lose a beautiful picture of God's saving work. We lose an invitation to participate. Here's something big we lose. I think that many Christians assume that God calls some people to serve him, and he calls them in really dramatic ways. So we have the burning bush. God actually talks to him out of a bush. It's like unmistakable, and commissions him for service. With the women, we don't hear any divine voice. There's no record of like God told them to do this. They just saw what needed to be done and they did it. And I think we need both of these models side by side, because sometimes God does speak audibly or do something really dramatic to call us into his service. But most of the time, I think it's more like what happens with these women. They see what needs to be done and they do it because it's the right thing to do. And I love the way the story issues an invitation for all of us to participate in God's good work without waiting for somebody to tap us on the shoulder and say, this one's on you.
Yeah.
You actually don't need anyone to tap you on the shoulder or to notice you or to commission you or to speak to you. You just need to see what's wrong and say, not on my watch.
Ooh, let's end there. Thank you, Dr. Carmen Imes. Always a pleasure, my friend.
So much fun.
Thank you for joining us for the Chick Report. And thanks also to our wonderful producer, Talitha Summers, and our fabulous production manager, Kyle Walker. Till next time, remember, love is the one rule that rules them all.